I'm now going to take you through seizures. Epilepsy is a medical condition that affects a person's brain. To be diagnosed with epilepsy, it would mean that you would be likely to have reoccurring seizures. The causes of epilepsy could be from being deprived of oxygen at birth, from a brain infection such as meningitis, or perhaps a stroke or a head injury. Although in more than half of the people with epilepsy, they are unable to diagnose the cause of their condition. So I'm now going to take you through two types of epilepsy: tonic-clonic seizures and focal seizures. A tonic-clonic seizure is where somebody goes rigid, falls to the floor, they may let out a cry as they do so, and they will have convulsive involuntary movements. Whilst this is happening, you may see arching of their back, you may see them go quite pale and signs of cyanosis. You may also see frothing at the mouth and maybe some blood that's coming out of the mouth where they may have bitten down on their tongue. For a focal seizure, this may come in the form of an absent seizure, so perhaps where they're just staring into space. They might be wandering around aimlessly. They may be plucking at their clothes or lip smacking. They may be aware, but they may not be aware of their surroundings. So how to treat for both of these? For a tonic-clonic seizure, where they have fallen to the ground and convulsing, we would need to firstly time the seizure, and we'll come back to why the time is important in a moment. We need to make sure the area around them is clear, and that if they are on hard flooring and we're worried about their head banging against the floor, that we pop something to cushion their head. Make sure that's not your hands, because whilst they're in that state, they can be quite strong and they could do you some harm. So just pop a cardigan or a pillow or something underneath the head. Then we're just going to stand back and we're going to allow it to happen. If we aren't aware that this person suffers with epilepsy, then we would need to call an ambulance immediately. If we are aware that this person suffers with epilepsy, then we can allow this to continue for up to 5 minutes. If it gets past 5 minutes, we then need to call an ambulance. If the casualty relaxes and doesn't regain consciousness and has another seizure, we would also need to call an ambulance. Once they've finished their seizure, we would then perform basic life support. So we would go in and we would do our primary survey. So we would check that they're responsive, and if they're not, we need to make sure whether they're breathing, and then we would determine whether they're breathing, whether we need to place them in the recovery position or to start CPR. For a focal seizure, we need to make sure that they are safe in their surroundings. So this could happen anywhere. They may be near a road or near some water or near some dangerous machinery. So try and keep them isolated in an area without restraining them. If we can get them sat down, then that's great, but just make sure that they're not wandering off and keep them safe. They may still be aware of what's going on, so we can just calmly talk to them and let them know what's happening. When they come out of their seizure, they may have no recollection of what's happened, so we would need to let them know, plenty of reassurance, and let them rest. The same applies here as with tonic-clonic seizures. So if the seizure goes past 5 minutes, we would need to call an ambulance, and if we're not aware that this person has epilepsy, we would also need to call 999 immediately. There's a few things to remember whilst treating for both of those seizures. The first is to make sure that we don't restrain them in any way, that we don't scare them out of their seizure, that we don't give them anything to eat or drink, and that we don't put anything in their mouth, even if we're concerned that their tongue is compromising their airway.